I never thought I'd hear those words under my daughter's roof. Obey me, or get out. Ethan's voice cut through the quiet like a knife. We had just finished dinner. The plates were still on the table, the candle still burning low. Clara sat across from me, her hands folded in her lap, eyes fixed on her plate. She didn't say a word. At first, I thought he was joking. I looked at him and waited for a smile that never came. His face was calm, too calm, the kind of calm that hides anger behind it. I'm talking to you, he said again, leaning back in his chair. You will either follow my rules in this house, or you leave it. The clock ticked on the wall. That was the only sound in the room. I didn't understand what I had done wrong. I had been there barely a week. I helped with the garden, washed the dishes, kept out of their way. I even stayed quiet when Ethan corrected Clara over small things: too much salt in the soup, the wrong towel in the bathroom. But now, suddenly, I was the problem. What rule did I break? I asked, keeping my voice steady. He gave a short laugh. You questioned me at dinner. I thought back. All I'd said was, Clara's been looking tired lately. Maybe she should rest more. That was it. That was enough to make him angry. I looked at my daughter. She still wouldn't lift her head. Her fingers trembled slightly against the tablecloth. Clara, I said softly, is this really what you want? Her lips parted, but no words came out. She just shook her head barely, almost invisible, and whispered, Please, Dad, don't. That was when I understood. She wasn't silent because she agreed with him. She was silent because she was afraid. I nodded slowly. My throat felt tight, my chest heavy. I could have argued. I could have shouted. But what would that change? There are moments in life when pride must step aside for peace. So I stood up. The chair creaked behind me. I walked to my room, opened the small wooden wardrobe, and took out my suitcase. I didn't have much, just a few clothes, a photograph of Clara as a child, and an old watch that used to belong to her mother. As I zipped the bag, I heard their voices in the other room. Ethan said something sharp. Clara's voice came out low and broken, but I couldn't make out the words. I wanted to turn back. I wanted to take her hand, tell her she could come with me. But she had made her choice. Or maybe she was too scared to make one. When I stepped into the living room again, Ethan was standing by the door, waiting. Good decision, he said flatly. It's best for everyone. I looked past him, at Clara. She finally lifted her head. Her eyes were red, wet, filled with things she couldn't say. I forced a small smile. Take care of yourself, sweetheart. Then I walked out into the cold night air. The wind felt heavy against my face. Behind me, the door closed with a sound I'll never forget. Soft, final, like the end of a chapter I hadn't planned to finish. As I reached the gate, I looked back one last time. The curtains moved, just slightly. I thought I saw her silhouette there, frozen in the light. But I didn't call out. I didn't wave. I just whispered to myself. She didn't even look up. When I first moved into Clara's house, it didn't feel like a home. It felt like a place that was trying too hard to pretend it was one. The walls were painted a pale cream, the kind that never gets warm no matter how much sunlight touches it. Every photo on the wall showed them smiling, yet none of those smiles reached their eyes, at least not Clara's. I noticed it the moment I arrived, though I said nothing. She had called me 2 weeks earlier. Dad, she said on the phone, why don't you stay with us for a while? The house feels too big when Ethan's away. Her voice was soft, but underneath it, I could hear something else. Loneliness, maybe even fear. I told her I'd come. I always do. When I arrived, Ethan greeted me at the door with that smooth, practiced smile he wears so well. Mr. Harris, he said, shaking my hand firmly. Welcome to your daughter's home. He said it in a way that sounded polite, but I could tell he was reminding me that it was his home now. Clara hugged me tightly that day. For a second, she didn't let go, and I felt her shoulders shaking. She pulled back quickly and smiled, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "Dinner's almost ready," she said. "You'll love it." I wanted to ask what was wrong, but I didn't. Sometimes, silence feels safer than truth. The days that followed were calm on the surface, but I could feel tension running underneath, like a current no one wanted to name. Ethan was kind when he wanted to be offering to pour tea, asking about my health, pretending to listen when I talked about my old students. But every time Clara spoke, he found something to correct. "Not like that, Clara. You don't need to say it that way." Even when she laughed, he would look at her in that quiet, warning way until she stopped. One morning, I walked into the kitchen and found her sitting at the table, staring into a cold cup of coffee. "Did you sleep well?" I asked. She smiled, though her eyes looked tired. I did, but I noticed the faint shadow near her wrist, a bruise, fading but still there. I reached out without thinking. "What happened here?" She pulled her sleeve down quickly. "I hit the cupboard," she said, forcing a laugh. "You know how clumsy I am." I wanted to believe her. I really did. But I remembered how she used to be as a child, careful, steady, never careless. That night, we had dinner together. The air was heavy with things unsaid. I mentioned that she'd been looking pale lately. Ethan stopped cutting his meat. "She's fine," he said. "I'm just saying she could use some rest," I replied, trying to keep my tone light. His eyes met mine, calm, cold. I said, "She's fine." Clara lowered her gaze. I saw her hands tremble slightly under the table. We ate in silence after that. The only sounds were the clinking of forks and the quiet hum of the fridge. When the meal was over, I helped gather the plates. Clara whispered, "Thank you for coming, Dad. It's nice having you here." Her voice cracked a little at the end. I smiled and said, "I'll always come when you call." But as I looked around the room, the neatness, the perfect order, I realized something. This wasn't just Ethan's way of living. It was his way of controlling. Every chair in place. Every curtain drawn just right. Even the air felt like it belonged to him. That was the night before he told me to leave. If I'd known how close everything was to breaking, maybe I would have spoken up sooner. Maybe I would have stayed awake, waiting for Clara to knock on my door and tell me what she couldn't say out loud. But she never came. And by the next evening, my suitcase was packed. The house I left behind wasn't the same one I'd entered. It was colder. And so was she. The room I rented after leaving Clara's house was small, barely large enough for a bed, a table, and a single chair. The walls were stained with age, the window glass scratched from years of dust storms. But it was quiet, and for a while, that was enough. Mrs. Turner, my old neighbor, helped me move in. She was the kind of woman who always knew when someone needed help before they asked. She dusted the table and said, "It's not much, but it'll do until you find better." I smiled. "It's only temporary," I told her. But even as I said it, I wasn't sure where I'd go next. That first night, I unpacked my suitcase slowly. My clothes, my books, and the framed photograph of Clara when she was 8 missing a front tooth, her smile wide and proud as she held the paper crown I'd made her. I placed it on the table beside my bed. It made the room feel less empty. I tried to read before sleeping, but my eyes kept drifting to the phone. The screen was dark. No messages. I told myself she was busy. Maybe she was visiting friends or helping Ethan with work. But deep down, I knew better. Days passed quietly. I walked every morning to the nearby park, sat on a bench, and watched children chase kites across the open field. Sometimes I'd hear a little girl call, "Daddy," and for a moment, I'd turn, expecting to see Clara as a child again running toward me with her hair flying behind her. Then I'd blink, and she was gone. In the afternoons, I'd sit by the window with tea, staring at the street below. Mrs. Turner would stop by now and then with groceries or a slice of pie. She'd talk about her grandkids, about the weather. about the price of milk. I'd listen, nod, and smile. But when she left, the silence always came back, heavy and full. Sometimes, at night, I'd replay that last dinner in my head. Ethan's voice, Clara's silence, the sound of my own footsteps, leaving her behind. I'd close my eyes and whisper to the dark, "Did I do the right thing?" One morning, I called Clara. It rang 3 times before going to voicemail. "Hey, sweetheart," I said. "Just checking in. I hope you're all right. I'm fine. The room's small, but it's peaceful. Call me when you can." I hung up and waited. No reply. The next day, I called again. Straight to voicemail. By the 3rd day, I stopped leaving messages. Mrs. Turner noticed my silence. One evening, she knocked on my door with a cup of soup and said, "You've been quiet, Mr. Harris. Something on your mind?" I smiled faintly. "Just thinking about my daughter." She sighed. "She'll call. Daughters always do. Sooner or later." I wanted to believe her. I really did. That night, I couldn't sleep. The rain tapped softly against the window. Steady and endless. I sat on the edge of the bed, holding my phone in my hand, watching the screen glow faintly in the dark. No new messages, no missed calls. I scrolled through our old texts. Most were short. "Dad, don't forget your pills. Made your favorite soup today." Then, nothing for weeks. I placed the phone beside me and stared at the ceiling. A small crack ran across it like a line between 2 worlds. The life I had before, and the one I was trying to start again. I woke up just before dawn. The rain had stopped. The world outside was still. I picked up the phone one last time before heading out for my walk. Still nothing. I sighed and whispered, "She'll call. She has to." Then I set the phone on the table and stepped out into the pale morning light, never realizing how close I was to the moment that would change everything. That morning began like any other. The sky outside was still gray, and the world smelled of wet earth after the night's rain. I made a small cup of tea, sat by the window, and listened to the faint hum of the city waking up. I was about to take my first sip when I heard the soft vibration on the table. My phone. It buzzed once, stopped, then started again. I frowned, reached for it, and froze. The screen showed a number I knew by heart, Clara. But that wasn't what made my hand shake. It was the line above it. 111 missed calls. For a few seconds, I thought it was a mistake. Maybe the phone had glitched. Maybe I was still dreaming. Then, before I could process it, it started ringing again. I answered so quickly I almost dropped it. "Clara?" Her voice came through, breathless, trembling. "Dad, please, come." Something crashed in the background glass, maybe a vase. I heard her gasp. Then, a man's voice, sharp and angry. "Clara, what's happening?" I shouted. "Dad, he..." The line went dead. I stared at the screen, waiting for it to light up again. It didn't. My tea had gone cold. My heart hadn't. Within minutes, I was dressed and out the door. I didn't even lock it. The morning air was cold, biting against my face as I hurried down the street. Mrs. Turner was standing outside, watering her plants. When she saw me rushing past, she called out, "Mr. Harris, you all right?" "It's Clara," I said quickly. "Something's wrong. She called she needs help." She dropped the watering can, water spilling over her shoes. "Get in the car," she said. "I'll drive." We drove fast through the narrow roads, the tires hissing against the wet ground. My hands wouldn't stay still. I kept calling Clara's number, again and again. Each time, it went straight to voicemail. Mrs. Turner's voice was tight. "Should I call the police?" "Not yet," I said, though I could barely hear myself. "Just get me there." When we turned onto Clara's street, something in my chest sank. The front gate was wide open. Her car was parked crooked near the curb. I stepped out before the car had even stopped. My shoes splashed through a shallow puddle as I hurried up the path. The front door was open too. "Clara?" I called. No answer. The air inside was heavy, like the house itself was holding its breath. The curtains swayed slightly, and I caught the faint smell of Clara's perfume mixed with something sharp, something that didn't belong. The living room was a mess. A lamp lay shattered on the floor. A chair was tipped over. I stepped carefully, my heart thudding so loud it drowned out the silence. "Clara," I called again. From somewhere down the hallway, a sound soft, broken, like a whimper. I turned toward it and followed, my footsteps slow but certain. The guest room door was half open. I pushed it gently. The hinges creaked. Inside, the room looked like it had been caught in the middle of a storm. Drawers half open. A picture frame face down on the floor. I bent down and picked it up. It was their wedding photo. The glass was cracked right across Ethan's face. Behind me, Mrs. Turner whispered, "Mr. Harris, where is she?" I couldn't answer. My throat had closed up. We checked the kitchen, the back door, even the garage. Nothing. The house was silent, yet it felt like it was watching us. Then, from outside, the faint sound of sirens began to grow. Mrs. Turner looked at me. "Did you call them?" I shook my head. "No." We both stepped out onto the porch. The flashing red and blue lights were turning the wet street into a blur of color. I looked down at my phone, still in my hand. The last call from Clara had been 7 minutes ago. 7 minutes. I gripped the phone tighter. My fingers trembled. Whatever had happened to her, it wasn't over yet. The sirens grew louder until they stopped right in front of the house. 2 patrol cars, lights still flashing. An officer stepped out first, young, alert, his hand resting on his belt. Another followed behind him, older, quieter, eyes scanning everything. I stood on the porch, unable to move. Mrs. Turner kept a hand on my arm, but I barely felt it. My ears rang with Clara's voice those few seconds over the phone, that word she never finished. "Sir?" the younger officer said. "You the one who called?" I shook my head. My voice came out hoarse. "No, she did. My daughter. She called me." Then the line cut. The older one nodded toward the open door. "We'll take a look." I followed them in. Every step felt heavy, every corner colder than the last. The officers moved carefully, speaking in short, quiet words into their radios. One of them asked me to stay back. I tried, but my eyes followed everything they touched. Every drawer opened, every piece of glass turned over. They went down the hallway. One pushed open the door to the study. The other stopped near the back door. Something in his posture changed. "Sir," he said softly, "you might not want to come here." But I did. I walked past him, ignoring the warning, and then I saw it. The floor near the back door was stained a dark mark spreading slowly over the tile. The smell hit me first, sharp and metallic. For a moment, I forgot to breathe. On the ground, a phone lay cracked open, its screen flickering faintly, Clara's. Next to it was a slipper. Her slipper. I knelt down before I even knew what I was doing. My fingers hovered above the floor, trembling. I wanted to touch it, to make it real, or maybe make it disappear, but I couldn't. My whole body shook. "Is she?" I tried to speak, but the word refused to come out. One of the officers placed a hand on my shoulder. "We're not sure yet, sir. There's another unit searching the woods behind the house." The woods. I remembered the path behind the garden, the one she used to walk with her mother when she was little. She once told me she liked how quiet it was there, like the world forgets to make noise. I turned toward the door, but the officer stopped me. "Please, stay here." Minutes passed, maybe longer. I couldn't tell. Mrs. Turner sat quietly on the couch, clutching her purse like it could keep her steady. Then, from outside, voices, movement, someone shouting for a stretcher. I stood, my legs weak. "Clara?" I whispered, though no one answered. An officer came in a moment later. "We found her," he said gently. My chest tightened. "Is she?" "She's alive," he said quickly. "Barely conscious, but alive. We're taking her to the hospital now." For the first time in days, I felt air fill my lungs again. My knees gave out, and Mrs. Turner caught my arm before I fell. "Alive," I repeated. "Alive." At the hospital, the hours blended together. Machines beeped. Nurses moved quickly. I sat outside her room, hands clasped, staring at the floor. Ethan wasn't there. They told me he had been taken into custody at a nearby gas station. Blood on his hands and a story that didn't make sense. When the doctor finally came out, he spoke quietly. "She's stable for now. She asked for you." I went in. Clara lay pale against the white sheets, her breathing shallow. Her eyes fluttered open when she heard me. "Dad," she whispered. "I'm here, sweetheart," I said, taking her hand gently. Tears filled her eyes. "I tried to call you. I didn't think you'd pick up in time." I swallowed hard. "You called me 111 times," I said. "I should have known something was wrong sooner." She shook her head weakly. "No, Dad, you came. That's what matters." For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The sound of the monitor was steady, soft. I held her hand and felt the faint pulse beneath my fingers. Proof that she was still here, still fighting. I looked at her face, at the faint bruise near her temple, and all I could think of was the little girl with the paper crown. I whispered, "You don't have to go back there. Not ever again." Her eyes closed slowly, a single tear rolling down her cheek. "I know," she breathed. That night, as I sat by her bedside, I took out my phone. The call log was still open, a long list of missed calls stretching down the screen. I scrolled slowly, my vision blurring, and stopped at the first one. 111 missed calls. I stared at it for a long time before whispering, "She called me 111 times, and I wasn't there." Outside, the rain began again, soft, steady, and endless. But this time, I didn't mind, because she was alive. And that was enough.